Chapter 7. Falling Sideways. The woods looked different with the wolf in her name. The forest shadows held less danger when the hunters had teeth. Philon walked tall with her father where Selena had lagged behind. Their steps took them farther. Eyes scanned the trees with only the other's breath for reassurance of their presence. Hunters acting as they should. They moved north for hours and stopped to eat. It was a quiet, somber occasion, and Philon noticed the lack of chatter between them. Normally, father always felt the need to talk to her, to fill the silence with some sort of sound. Now he spoke through grunts, looks, and gestures. She did not speak either, following his lead, focusing on the wild. There was a strange sort of security in this moving without talking. The typical clashes their words brought were absent. Trust moved in to fill the space. After a time they turned west, trying to find their way back to something familiar. The hunters knew they would not find what they were looking for, but forward was better than nowhere at all. Nothing around them seemed to change. Trees stood and animals called. It all began looking the same, and Philon began to wonder if they were unknowingly going in circles. When the sun was finally low, they stopped for the night. There was no speaking then either. They just moved the way they knew they should. Soon, a fire was crackling, and they were chewing on a ration of dried meat. "We should head southwest in the morning," the older hunter said, breaking the silence like a rock. "Think we lost the beasts?" the younger hunter asked. The answer was a nod. The fire crackled, and the night sounds began. "I'll take first watch." "Right. Good night, Philon." The new name struck the young wolf and caused strange emotions that were not normally there. A curious combination of pride and nausea danced through her chest, into her belly, and finally settled in her feet. Philon. Philon. It was a good name, but was it true? Her hands moved across her closely cut head. The jagged chops stung, but left her feeling light and free. The hunter's haircut was something she had seen, but never tried for fear of stoning. Selena had taken an awful risk when she made pants and wore them in public. She was certain the only reason she had gotten away with it was because they clung to her body, showing her figure off to the leers of men. It was almost more proof that she was a woman, and thus it was tolerated. A man's haircut, though, would make her less pleasant to look upon. They would not be able to tell she was a woman until they were close. It was dangerous. The fire popped, and the young hunter's eyes shot up. A cold mist had started to form during her meditation. Philon took the bowstring from her neck, strung her bow branch, and pulled it a few times to make it loose. Standing slowly, the little wolf made her way to a tree. Putting her back to the wooden frame would stop predators from creeping up behind her. Eyes let go of their focus, allowing for a wider arc of sight. Ears took in more sound, hearing crickets, hisses, movements, all the creatures of the night. A footfall caused a shift in the grass. Something large was moving. Feet carried a large mass, approaching under the guise of stealth. Philon moved from tree to tree. Feet carefully chose their resting places. The intruder was close, leaning against another tree. An arrow was nocked and the bow drawn. Heavy breathing rounded a corner, and its owner moved on all fours. A huge thing, with a shadow like a bear, moved into sight. It looked left, right, then directly into the young hunter's eyes. A bit of blue sparkled. Philon could not move. She recognized that blue. The eyes which had recognized her. The eyes which had first seen. The wolf turned his nose up, scenting the air. He found something and moved away. The fog thickened, and Philon could move once more. She shook, realizing she had stepped away from her sleeping father. What was that? Is the mist really trying to separate us? The fire was just at the edge of her sight. It took a moment for the circle to come back into view, but she was able to step back into it. Fear was gnawing at her guts, causing her to breathe quickly, making her want to scream. She drew a breath, held it, and let it out. I have to be careful, if the mist really is trying to separate us. No, I will stay with him. Father, Philon spoke softly, touching the old hunter's shoulder. The beasts. No more words were needed. The older hunter rose and quickly gathered his gear. Dirt was pitched onto the fire and they moved deeper into the woods. Philon was uncertain of their direction, but they had lost their way ages ago, so the right way was forward. The forest seemed to grow larger as the world became less certain, creeping through the night like so many nocturnal things, driven by instinct instead of knowledge. Finally, a pile of rocks stood in front of them. They climbed and reached a solid wall. Their path was blocked. There should be no mountains here, the older hunter remarked. Philon explored the surface. I think your information is wrong. We're not in our forest anymore. His voice began to lose its steady sound as he looked far away. The mist has us. No! Philon breathed hard, trying to calm her fears. No, he's just afraid. The mist does not have us. We are just lost. Listen, whelp, her father snarled. The mist takes you where it wants, not where you want. Every time this haze rises before us, we are no longer in the world we know. We're like fleas in the back of some great bear that's wandering around. We might round the next corner and find ourselves in our living room, or we might step right off a cliff and never touch the ground again. What would you have us do? Hold on to me, lest we be separated. Philon held onto the older hunter's sleeve. They stayed close, moving from one large stone to the next. It was slow going, but the mist was starting to settle below them. Soon, the rocks they stood upon were clear, but the fog stayed below them, as if they were on a mountain above the clouds. They sat for a time, breathing, thinking, planning their next move. The air was different, colder, thinner, less nourishing. There were no crickets or typical night sounds, only wind and cold. Philon pulled her cloak tighter. Looking to the older hunter for advice, she asked, Where are we? High in the sky, he said almost to himself. Then he shook himself from his thoughts and spoke more clearly. We're on a mountain. Yeah, right. I told you, the older hunter barked. The mist takes us where it wants us to be, not where we want to be. And what do we need to be here for? Maybe we just need to be away from the wolves. Maybe you just need to come to dinner with us. A harsh, screechy voice crowed from above them. Philon looked up and saw a naked woman with gray skin, bird-like talons, and feather-covered wings perched on a higher section of the rock face. The younger hunter froze as her mind tried to deal with the impossible nature of what she was seeing, but the elder hunter was not so fazed. Hail and well met, her father said in a strong voice. Hail, human, the bird woman hissed. What brings you here? The mist brought us. The mist? It cocked its head to one side like an owl that needed a better view. What have you done to anger the Fae? We were chased by the beasts and became lost, Philon's father clarified. The bird woman mused as she swayed one way and then another. She licked her lips, then pulled them back, revealing hideous, blade-like triangles. A smile of daggers displayed the bird woman's ability to tear them to pieces in an instant. Maybe you come with us. Yes, we like men. Philon knocked an arrow and aimed it at the creature. Hunters don't eat hunters, she hissed. Oh, how cute, the bird woman sneered. The cub has teeth. She opened her mouth, and a long, drawn-out screech sounded. The call was answered by others, a call to hunt. The arrow snapped forward, piercing the creature's breast with lethal precision. The hunting screech grew into a cry of pain, and Philon felt her ears pop as the creature tipped back and fell into the mist below. Go! The older hunter barked as he jumped along the stone wall. Philon moved to follow, but her ears were still ringing and it was throwing her off balance. The sound of flapping wings finally penetrated her stunned senses, driving a fresh wave of panic through her. A shout drew Philon's gaze. One of the bird women had swooped and seized her father in its talons. Without thought, a second arrow was drawn, knocked, and loosed, striking the creature, who immediately dropped her prey. The older hunter touched stone and barely kept himself from tumbling over. We have to jump, he shouted over the din of angry cries. Are you mad? It's the only way. Philon shook her head. Her father scowled, but there was no time to argue. Soon, both hunters were shooting arrows at the creatures, downing one after another. High-pitched sounds surrounded them as feathers fell like snow. A rumble drew their gaze. The mountain was coming down. Without waiting, the older hunter grabbed the youngster and leapt off into the mist. The rush of air filled their ears as the world seemed to turn sideways. Their bodies seemed weightless, falling but not falling, surrounded by a cold, clammy blanket of white that held them in place until they skipped across a slick surface before settling into a muddy pool with a loud splash. Philon kicked and thrashed in order to swim, but found the water was shallow. Standing, the hunters found themselves back in the foggy swamp where they had first lost the beast pack. The smells were right, but the depth of it was revolting. Young arms supported older legs as they moved to the shore. They collapsed, panting. None of this made sense. A moment passed, and then they rose and stumbled forward together. Feet moved forward without speech, forward through the misty marsh until rock and tree gave shelter from mud and cold. Philon set her father down, and they both breathed deeply. Removing the quiver from her back, she poured out the water and counted. 7 arrows left. Slowly they were running through their supplies. The mist. It's trying to separate us. Her father's statement hung in the air, sending a chill of fear through the younger hunter's body. So what if it is? Philon took a deep breath and then steadied her voice. I'm not leaving you, father. We'll make it if we stay together. We can't, he said, looking much older than his daughter had ever seen him. She wants us. Who wants us? The Gray Lady. That old fairy tale? Philon asked without scoffing. The same. Philon wanted to rebuke him, wanted to tell them that he was mad, but the evidence was all around them, and she was having a difficult time ignoring it. What does she want with us? She finally asked. Maybe she's trying to teach us respect, her father said after a few moments. Respect? For what? For not believing in her. But you believe. But you don't. The old hunter rebuked her gently. I do now. Since when? Since we jumped off a mountain and fell sideways. Philon's voice echoed in the haze. A cool breeze began to blow the mist around them away. It's not fair. She can't have you, her father said with some of his grit returning. I won't let her take you, Selena. The speaking of her old name caused her to wince. The strength of her new name was something she did not want to let go of, and now the man who had given her that name wasn't using it. This was unacceptable. She would not have it. You aren't, her stern look told him. You left Selena in the woods yesterday. I'm Philon, and I think— You think nothing, pup! Her father was snarling, a mixture of old emotions mixed with her mannish status, confusing them both. Father, she spoke with a surprising level of calm, the mist is trying to separate us. It tried to lure me away earlier, and now? Well, look at us. We're running in circles. I know, her father said sharply, but we need to stay together. We need to get back to the village and warn the others. I don't think so, Philon said as she looked out into the thickening fog. I know you need to get back, but I don't know about myself. If she's anything like the stories say, well, you know we can't fight her, and I can't go back. No, the old father said as his resolve slipped a little. We need to go back to the village. I can't. Her wet hands slapped the skin on her head. What do you think they'll do when they see me like this? What do you think they'll do to you for betraying them? That's Lars for you, she said in imitation of the other men. He's just so loony he thinks his daughter's a man, and there's monsters in the woods. The mist took them where? Aw, poor old man lost his mind. Stop it, Selena. I'm not Selena anymore, she snapped back at him. My name is Philon. Philon. I am the daughter of a great hunter, and I will not let him wander in the mists like this when I need to go. Selena, Philon, please come back with me. The fight had left the old hunter's words, and he had fallen into pleading with her. It was a terrible thing to see in the man who had always been so strong in her eyes. Philon looked away from her aging father and took a breath to center her thoughts. A bit of wisdom came to her in that space, and she felt a sad smile tugging back her lips. Do you remember the story of where the mist takes you? She asked with a calm that frightened her. The surprise shone in her father's face as he remembered the old tales. In a time when adventuring into the fairy world was encouraged, heroes would travel into the unknown and return wiser or madder, and sometimes both. The mist takes you where you need to go, not where you want to go, the old man repeated, and pain filled his voice as his eyes fell to the ground. The mist wants me, she told him gently. I can't live in my father's house anymore. I can't rely on his protection. I need to make it on my own. She paused and then smirked as she added, Besides, I was one bad harvest away from a witch burning anyway. I know, but... She cut him off with a hug. It was a dirty trick, but it never failed to quiet him. Oh, Papa, she said softly, you know I'm right. I know, but... Shh. Don't fight it. He squeezed her tightly, but then relaxed a little. Please let me go. This one time, let me go. Drawing back, she looked into his eyes and held his gaze with serious expression. When finally he nodded, his gaze fell to the ground and did not rise. With a kiss to his forehead, she whispered to him one last time, I love you, Papa. Then, before he could gather the will to fight, she turned and ran off into the mist.